They left her at the airport. No ride. No answer. Just a plastic chair and the smell of burnt coffee. She sat there in her Sunday dress, hands folded over a birthday gift no one asked for. The bow never came untied. She didn't call again. Didn't cry. She just stood up and walked out, like someone who had just buried the last illusion of family. That night, she froze every bank account they thought they controlled. They thought she was forgettable, a burden, too old to matter. But she wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was building her exit, and when they looked for her again, she was already gone. They thought she was stranded, but she was loading the first suitcase of her freedom. I stood beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of Detroit Metro Airport, a sea of strangers rolling their suitcases past me like I wasn't there. The automatic doors hissed open and shut. A blast of January wind whipped through my coat. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I kept telling myself he was coming. Jacob was just running late. Maybe traffic. Maybe his phone died. Maybe I missed his call. But my phone sat silent in my pocket, heavy with the truth I was refusing to hold. I had dressed up for the trip. A pale blue wool coat I'd owned for 20 years. The hem was fraying. I'd stitched it 3 winters ago with a thread that didn't quite match, but it was warm, and it was mine. The scarf was hand-knitted, cream-colored, soft, worn thin at the ends where I'd wrung it too often between my fingers. The shoes weren't new, but I had shined them that morning. I remember that. Sitting on the edge of my bed, hunched over with a tin of polish and an old rag, scrubbing gently until the leather stopped looking tired. The gift bag at my feet was small. Inside, a framed photo of his father holding Jacob at 3 days old. I'd wrapped it twice, afraid the glass might crack. I thought maybe he'd like it for his office. Something real. Something rooted. He used to say he didn't remember much about his dad, but he always asked about him around this time of year. I thought maybe that still meant something. The airport speakers announced arriving flights. A couple near me embraced. A woman ran into her granddaughter's arms. Laughter echoed. Someone nearby offered a hot chocolate to their father, and I just stood there, watching the door. It wasn't until the snow started sticking to the shoulders of my coat that I knew he wasn't coming. I reached into my purse with a trembling hand, pulled up my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I tapped his name. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. "Hey, it's Jacob. Leave a message." I didn't. What could I say? I stood there for another minute, maybe 2, until I realized the cold wasn't just outside. It was inside me now. Quiet, spreading, settling into the space where hope used to be. The cab line was long. I waited in silence. The driver didn't say much when I gave him the address. Same house I'd lived in for 38 years. The one with the pale green shutters he helped me paint when he was 12. He used to call it the Turtle House. Said it looked safe, like a shell. I liked that. The drive home was quiet. Outside, the city blurred under strings of post-holiday lights. Shops had window displays for Valentine's Day already. Love, pink hearts, little bears clutching satin roses. It felt obscene, like the world had skipped past morning into something sugary and loud. I kept the gift bag on my lap the whole ride. When we turned onto my street, I expected, still, somehow, that maybe his car would be there, parked out front. That maybe this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. But there was only fresh snow on the curb. No tire tracks, just a quiet blanket over everything. The porch light was still on. I'd left it burning, like a fool, thinking it might welcome someone home. I paid the cab driver, stepped out. The snow crunched beneath me. I climbed the steps slowly, each one pushing the truth deeper into my bones. I unlocked the door, stepped inside. The house smelled like lavender and thyme. My coat went onto the hook, my shoes into their tray. Ritual, movement without thinking. I carried the gift to the fireplace mantel, next to the photo of his wedding day. He had looked happy then, or at least determined. I remember holding my breath during the vows, praying silently that she'd see him, not just his ambition, but the boy who once fell asleep in my lap watching Mr. Rogers. I made tea. That's what you do, isn't it? When you're cold and a little broken and too proud to cry. I sat in the kitchen, the mug warm in my hands, steam fogging my glasses, and I didn't cry. I just sat and let the silence settle. Let it stretch, let it say all the things I never dared to. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Just me and the humming of the old refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. each second a soft accusation. You gave him everything. And still, he left you there. Like a package forgotten on the baggage claim. I stood eventually, walked to the hallway cabinet, opened the metal lockbox with the key I wore around my neck, pulled out the envelope labeled "in case." Inside, bank statements, trust access forms, medical directives, his name everywhere. Beneficiary, emergency contact, authorized signer, everywhere. I held the papers in my hands and felt my own breath deepen. Not shaking, not furious, just final. It was like stepping into the ocean in February, cold, brutal, but clarifying. I opened my laptop, logged in. There it was, my account. The one I had opened when Jacob was still in grade school, the one that paid for his braces, his band trip, his first car, his failed startup, his second. I clicked account settings, scrolled, found his name, join access Jacob Carter. I hovered, then I clicked remove authorized user. The system asked, "Are you sure?" Yes, it blinked. Done. No fireworks, no sirens, just a quiet line of text. Access revoked. And in that moment, the silence in my home changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. He left me at the airport. But I didn't stay stranded. I came home. I came back to myself. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I would start writing down everything I remembered. Not for him, not to leave a legacy, but so I could see myself clearly again, without his shadow stretching across every choice I made. They thought I was waiting to be rescued. But I was just getting ready to leave. The next morning I woke up before the sun, as I always did. Not because I had somewhere to be. Habit. Muscle memory from decades of rising early to pack school lunches, iron his shirt, scrape ice from the windshield so Jacob wouldn't be late to school. I made coffee in the same chipped percolator I'd had since his father was alive. The house was silent. No humming heater yet. No television in the background. Just the slow drip of coffee and the soft groan of my knees as I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. I stared at the newspaper I wouldn't read, my fingers resting on the edge, unmoving. The scent of the pages reminded me of mornings with his father, quiet, thoughtful, full of unspoken understanding. I used to set aside the comics for Jacob when he was little. He'd eat his cereal at the table, swinging his legs, telling me what Garfield got up to that day. He hasn't read a paper in years. Probably hasn't read anything that didn't come through a glowing screen. I don't know how long I sat like that. Eventually, the room grew lighter. Outside, the snow had stopped. Frost clung to the branches like veins. The world looked brittle, and I felt still, not numb, just very aware. I wasn't tired. I was emptied. And inside that emptiness, something small but steady began to stir. A question I hadn't allowed myself to ask in years. What if I stopped giving everything away? That thought carried me to the hallway closet. Second shelf. Old shoebox. Inside the manila folder I'd labeled legal and financial, in case. The handwriting was still neat, still hopeful. I had started the file years ago when Jacob launched his first business. He was 23. Brilliant. Passionate. Unprepared. He needed seed money for an app idea. Something about delivery logistics. I never quite understood it, but I believed in him. So I cashed out a portion of my early retirement savings, ignoring the bank manager's raised eyebrows. He's a dreamer, I told him. Dreamers need wings. He promised he'd pay me back. Of course he did. They always promise. That app failed. Another came after, then another. Each time I found a way. Took a second job at the library shelving books, cut corners on groceries, let the roof go another winter without repair. I skipped a trip to visit my sister in Arizona because he needed help covering rent. That became a pattern. He'd call, voice tight with stress, and I'd rearrange my life to soften his fall. No lecture, just support. I used to wear that like a badge. I opened the folder. Inside, account summaries, tax returns, letters, copies of checks with my signature on the memo lines, tuition, deposit, car repair. Each one a scar I hadn't noticed forming. I sifted through them slowly. My hands didn't shake. They moved like they were following a memory. Because they were. There was a note at the back of the folder. One I barely remembered writing. A list. Things to update if anything happens to me. It had Jacob's name beside almost every item. Executor, beneficiary, medical proxy, emergency contact. His name was everywhere. Like he had ownership over who I was, not because he earned it, but because I never imagined giving it to anyone else, and there it was. The pain wasn't the papers or the money or the memory. It was that I had tied my entire identity to a boy who stopped seeing me as a person years ago. Somewhere along the way, he began to treat me not like his mother, but like a system. Reliable, quiet, automatic. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. There were water stains in the corner from last fall's leak. I'd meant to fix it, but then Jacob needed help with a business loan payment, and I told myself the roof could wait. It always waited. So did I. Until yesterday. I stood up slowly, joints stiff, but resolve sharp. I carried the folder to the living room and set it beside my laptop. The weight of it made a soft thud on the table, like a door quietly shutting. I didn't open the computer right away. I walked to the fireplace and looked at the photo shelf. Jacob as a baby, in overalls too big for him, laughing at a bubble. Jacob at 10, holding a science fair ribbon. Jacob at his wedding, arm around the woman who would later call me overbearing for buying them groceries without asking first. Not one of those photos had me in them. I picked up the wedding photo and flipped it over. Nothing written. No date. No to mom with love. Just a hollow rectangle in a silver frame. Back at the laptop, I opened the banking portal. It asked for my passcode. I typed it slowly, deliberately like an oath. The screen lit up. My account balance stared back at me. And underneath it, the familiar label, Secondary Access, Jacob Carter. I hovered over the name. For a moment I waited for guilt to show up, for my heart to flinch, but nothing came, only clarity. I clicked Manage Access. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to remove access? This action is permanent. I clicked yes. The screen blinked, then changed. Access removed, pending reauthorization. It was done. That night I made soup from scratch, not because anyone was coming, just because I wanted the house to smell like something warm. I set the table for one, lit a candle, ate slowly, savoring the quiet. I hadn't done that in years. I used to rush through dinner to make time for the next request. Pay this, cover that, pick up the kids, send something early. Now I took each spoonful like a vow. My world had shrunk, yes, but for the first time I could feel the edges. And they were mine. When I finished eating, I poured myself a glass of wine. Just one. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Jacob, not yet, to myself. I wrote down the date, then one sentence. He stopped choosing me, so I finally chose myself. I underlined it, folded the page, slipped it into a fresh folder I labeled New Documents. Tomorrow I would call my lawyer, the one who helped me settle the estate when his father died. I would update everything. Remove Jacob from the will, from the emergency forms, from the future. Tonight, I would sleep. Not because I was exhausted, but because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for the next thing he'd need from me. Silence didn't mean surrender anymore. It meant peace. And from now on, that was the only thing I planned to protect. The first snow had melted into slush by the time I walked into Miss Jenkins' office. Her firm sat in a narrow brick building just off Main Street, quiet, unassuming, the kind of place no one looks twice at. I liked that. Privacy felt like power these days. I wore the same coat from the airport, didn't bother brushing off the salt stains. Let it speak for me before I even opened my mouth. She stood when I entered, firm handshake, no questions, just a look, steady, respectful, knowing. I didn't need sympathy. I needed precision. I handed her the folder, neatly labeled tabs, joint accounts, beneficiary designations, copies of every form Jacob ever signed with my name on it. She flipped through them quickly, eyes scanning like a surgeon reading X-rays. Then she looked up. "Are we sure?" she asked softly. I'm sure, with a voice that had forgotten how to tremble. We didn't talk about Jacob much. I didn't need to explain. The paper trail did the speaking. I could see it in her face. Every auto draft he set up for my accounts, every time he added himself as co-signer without telling me, every withdrawal labeled emergency that somehow led to dinner at steakhouses I'd never been invited to. I told her I wanted it all changed. Everything. New will, new trust, new beneficiaries, no shared access, no room for misinterpretation. Miss Jenkins nodded and pulled out a new file. We got to work. There's something surgical about cutting someone out of your life legally. No shouting, no confrontations, just check boxes. Black ink. Witness lines. Somewhere between line 3 and line 9, I realized I wasn't grieving anymore. I was reclaiming. That afternoon, I walked out with a folder of draft documents and a quiet confidence tucked into the lining of my coat. I stopped at the bakery on the way home. bought a single slice of lemon cake, sat by the window and ate it slowly, watching the world pass by like it always had, busy, detached, unaware that something small and seismic had just shifted inside a woman with graying hair and hands that had signed too many checks for people who stopped saying thank you. The following days moved like clockwork. I canceled Jacob's secondary card on my main account. I contacted the investment firm and revoked his status as authorized trader. I rerouted all future correspondence through Miss Jenkins' office. I changed the locks, the mailbox, even the emergency contact at my pharmacy. It wasn't revenge, it was relief. But Jacob noticed. The first text came 2 days later. "Mom, the bank's saying my card's not working. Can you check?" No greeting, no concern, just confusion that his personal ATM had gone offline. I didn't reply. The silence stung more than anything I could have said. He called, twice. I let it ring. The third time, I watched the screen light up from across the room. My name still showed as Mom on his caller ID. I wondered if he'd ever earn the right to use that word again. He left a voicemail. Mumbled something about fraud protection. Asked if I'd accidentally frozen the accounts. Accidentally. I laughed out loud. That night, I slept with the window cracked open, the breeze curling around my neck like forgiveness. Except it wasn't. It was something older, colder. Like the difference between forgetting and choosing not to remember. I got a letter the following week. A formal notice from the mortgage lender. Payment failed. Automatic draft declined. I read it slowly, sipping tea. No panic, just quiet observation. The financial floor beneath him was shifting, and he didn't even know I was the one pulling up the tiles. Then came the knock at the door. A man in a pressed jacket and polite shoes. Courier. He handed me a thick envelope. I signed without asking, took it into the kitchen, sliced it open with the same knife I used for peeling apples. Inside, papers stamped and highlighted. I didn't need to read the whole thing to know. Jacob was suing me, claiming mental incompetence, elder neglect. Accused someone, he didn't name who, of manipulating me into cutting him out. I let the papers fall flat on the table. The steam from my tea curled around them like smoke from a fire that had long since gone cold. That night, I met with Miss Jenkins again. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. We compiled everything. Emails, texts, bank records, screenshots of purchases he'd made with my accounts, recordings of voicemails where he joked about Mom always cleaning up the mess. She had a system. I had proof. She asked if I wanted to make a statement for court. Something emotional, maybe personal. No, I said. I want the documents to speak. My silence has already said more than he ever listened to. The court date came sooner than I expected. I wore navy blue, clean lines, flat shoes, pearl earrings my husband had given me in 1978. Jacob arrived looking tired, angry. His wife didn't look at me once. She wore red, a color for battle. I found that fitting. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed. Her expression said, "Don't waste my time." I appreciated that. Jacob's lawyer spoke first, talked about how families fall apart, about confusion, about sudden behavioral shifts, words that sound concerned but carry the weight of accusation. He called me the plaintiff's aging mother like I was some relic. I didn't blink. Then Miss Jenkins stood. Calm, precise. She opened a binder and began to read. Exhibit A. Text messages from Mr. Jacob Carter requesting funds under false pretenses. Exhibit B. Audio recording from November 12th, 3:04 p.m., in which Mr. Carter says, and I quote, "Once I get full control, she won't even notice what's missing." The courtroom didn't gasp, but they heard. I didn't look at Jacob. I didn't need to. The judge ruled within the hour. Case dismissed, sanctions imposed, my competency affirmed, my legal independence restored. I walked out of that courtroom with the same slow grace I had carried into it. No fist in the air, no tears, just a quiet, solid step into a life that now belonged only to me. Outside, the sun had started to melt the ice along the curb. I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, and let the light touch my face. They say power is loud, but they're wrong. It's the silence that remains after you've taken your name back. It's the sound of a door closing and locking from the inside. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and air conditioning, the kind that clings to old buildings and older stories. I took my seat quietly, folding my coat across my lap. No dramatic entrance, no sharp heels or flaring tempers. Just a woman with a file folder, a spine that no longer bent for convenience, and eyes that had finally learned to stop looking for permission. Jacob sat 2 rows ahead, hunched slightly, whispering to his attorney. His wife perched beside him like a crow on a power line, rigid, watchful, waiting for something to fall. She didn't look at me. Not once. But I saw the tension in her hands, the way her nails pressed into the leather of her purse. That told me enough. The clerk called the case. I stood. So did he. The air between us was thick with all the words we'd never said out loud. But I had no interest in arguments. Not anymore. That part of me had gone quiet. The judge was brisk, efficient. She scanned the paperwork, adjusted her glasses, and asked if either party wished to speak. Jacob's lawyer launched in. His voice oiled with concern, carefully painting me as confused, vulnerable, perhaps under influence. A woman too proud to ask for help. The irony almost made me smile. He spoke of memory lapses, erratic behavior, my sudden decision to revoke Jacob's access as emotionally reactive. It was all so polished, so scripted, but he didn't know I'd spent the last 6 weeks remembering everything. Miss Jenkins waited patiently. When her turn came, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace or point or pound. She simply opened the binder, turned toward the judge, and began. 1 page at a time, the truth came forward like a slow tide. Financial statements showing years of withdrawals under false pretenses. Audio recordings, his voice, clear and smug, discussing how easy I was to manage. Email chains where he'd forwarded my medical records without permission. Copies of messages to his wife with phrases like, "Once we've got it locked down and she won't even know she signed it." Each piece landed like a soft hammer. No drama. Just wait. When she reached the final exhibit, Miss Jenkins turned to me. "Would you like to say anything, Mrs. Keller?" I rose, turned toward the judge, and took a breath. I've spent most of my life loving people who forgot I was a person. I began. I raised a boy who learned how to take but never how to ask. I kept quiet for years because I thought that's what love was supposed to sound like. Quiet, patient, enduring. But silence can turn into erasure if you let it. And one day I woke up and realized I was disappearing. I paused. The judge didn't move. Neither did Jacob. I didn't come here to hurt anyone. I came here to draw a line, a legal one, a moral one. A line that says, I remember who I am now. And I won't be misused again. That's all. Then I sat. The courtroom was still, not because of shock, but because something in the room had shifted. The weight had moved, not onto him, but off of me. The judge nodded once. Her verdict was clear, swift. My rights reaffirmed, his claims dismissed, sanctions issued for misuse of financial access, a court order banning him from contacting me regarding money, all powers of attorney revoked, will and estate declared legally intact. It was over, or maybe it had just begun. Jacob's face was unreadable, his wife's jaw tightened, but I didn't look at them long. I didn't need to witness their unraveling. That wasn't why I came. I left the courtroom alone. No one waiting on the steps, no warm hand reaching for mine, just the wind, soft and honest, and the sky above, pale blue, like the coat I wore that day at the airport. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I danced. Not well. Not gracefully, but freely. I put on an old jazz record, poured myself a glass of red wine, and let the music find the parts of me that had gone quiet. My body creaked, my knees protested, but I swayed through the kitchen barefoot, the floor warm beneath my soles. The sound of a trumpet filling the corners of a house that finally felt like mine again. Later, I sat on the porch, blanket over my lap, watching the dusk settle over the neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes sang against the branches. I closed my eyes. He had tried to silence me through law, but law had become my witness. He thought I'd fall apart if he left me with nothing. But what he didn't understand was that I had already lost everything, my voice, my trust, my sense of worth. And I found all of it again the moment I stopped trying to prove I was worthy of being kept. They spoke in court. I spoke once, and they lost everything they thought they'd stolen. Not because I fought loudly, but because I stood fully. And I didn't flinch. The house I chose was old, quiet, and stubborn like me. It sat near the edge of a cliff in a small New England town where the Atlantic wind never really stopped. The shingles were faded to silver, the porch creaked with every step, and the lighthouse down the coast blinked through the fog like a heartbeat. Locals called it the keeper's house, though no one had kept anything here for years. Until now. The realtor had hesitated when I first asked to see it. Said it needed work, said the winters would be brutal, said the nearest grocery store was 20 miles away. I smiled and told her I wasn't afraid of quiet, and I had no one left to impress. It was the first place I ever bought with my own name, and no one else's name tied to it. No husband, no son, no cosigner. Just me. Margaret Keller, homeowner. The woman who used to clip coupons to cover her son's emergencies, now wiring funds to close on a property in cash. The irony didn't hurt, not anymore. Moving in didn't take long. My life had already been pared down. I brought only what mattered. My books, my sketch pads, the box of letters I wrote but never sent, a few framed photos, though most of those face the wall now. I kept the ones of me in my 20s, holding a paintbrush and laughing into the sun, before I became someone's backup plan. There were days when I didn't speak to anyone. No phone calls, no meetings, just the gulls and the water and the groan of old wood as the house settled around me. It didn't feel lonely, it felt like return, like breath. I started painting again. At first, just the sea, morning light over the rocks, the fierce gray of winter waves. But slowly my hands remembered more. Faces. My own. Versions of myself I had forgotten. I painted the girl who stood barefoot in a dress at 17, laughing in a field. I painted the woman at 40, who stayed silent during holidays so no one else would be uncomfortable. I painted the woman at 73, who opened her own mail and finally knew what it meant to belong to herself. The townspeople kept their distance at first. Polite nods, the occasional comment about the weather. But one afternoon, I brought a thermos of soup to the lighthouse keeper, an old widower with a bad hip and a sharp tongue. He squinted at me, muttered something about outsiders, but took the soup anyway. The next week, he left a loaf of bread on my porch. We never called it friendship, but we started trading things: tomatoes, stories, silences. One evening, as I stood on the porch watching the horizon burn orange, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, my old name. Inside, a birthday card. No note, just "Love, Jacob." I stared at it for a long time, not out of anger, just recognition. It was always like that. Too late, too little, too shallow. Like a man who brings water to a fire already turned to ash. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, because I finally understood that protecting my peace meant letting some doors stay closed. Even if it meant someone was knocking on the other side with flowers in their hand and a story about how they'd changed. He never knew where I moved. I made sure of that. Miss Jenkins helped me set everything up with a trust. The deed, the utilities, even the car title. My name but no forwarding address. Just enough presence to be legal. Not enough to be found. Freedom, it turns out, isn't a feeling. It's a discipline. A choice you make every single morning when no one's watching. To not explain yourself. To not wait for an apology. To not shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. There were mornings I cried. Not from sadness, from sheer release. The kind that only comes when your body realizes it's no longer waiting for the next hurt. I cried chopping onions, watching birds, folding laundry, because even peace can break your heart when you've lived without it long enough. But then I'd stand in front of my canvas, the brush firm in my hand, and I'd begin again. Some nights, the wind howled so hard I thought the windows would crack. I lit a fire, wrapped myself in a quilt I made during Jacob's first year of college. The same quilt I once folded and left on his couch when he got married, thinking he might need warmth. He never used it. I found it years later in a box marked old stuff. Now it kept me warm. They say healing isn't linear. I say it's tidal. Some days pull you back into memory. Some days carry you forward like driftwood finding shore. The house needed repairs. I learned how to replace window seals, reseal a bathtub, patch plaster. Nothing fancy. But I took pride in each fix. There was power in the turning of a wrench, in standing on a ladder and knowing no one would come running if I fell, so I learned to move carefully with presence. Life, I decided, was just like that, one deliberate step at a time. By spring, I had painted enough to fill the hallway. I hung them proudly, faces of women who had learned not to whisper when they meant to roar. Landscapes where the storm had passed but left color behind. One afternoon, the local library asked if I'd consider teaching a watercolor class. I hesitated at first. Then I said yes. The room filled with women my age, some older, all of them carrying stories in their hands behind their eyes. We didn't talk about the past, not directly, but it surfaced in the way we painted. One brushstroke at a time, we built something tender and defiant. Something no court or sun or silence could take from us again. When they asked me what brought me to town, I smiled and said, I needed a lighthouse. No one questioned it, because they knew. I wasn't running from anything. I had finally arrived. Freedom wasn't a gift. No one handed it to me with soft apologies or second chances. I earned it. With silence, with clarity, with a signature on a document that said, I am no longer for sale, no longer for sacrifice. I am my own. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for watching, but for witnessing. For sitting beside a story that might feel a little too close. For listening to the quiet pain of a woman who was once forgotten and watching her choose herself again, not with vengeance, but with dignity. Because this wasn't just about Margaret. It's about what happens when we finally stop asking for love in places that only give us silence. When we stop shrinking ourselves to make others comfortable. When we wake up one morning and say, enough. Margaret's story reminds us that it's never too late to draw a boundary, to start again, to choose peace over performance, and maybe most importantly, to reclaim the life that was always meant to be ours. For many of us over 55, especially women, we've been taught that our value is tied to sacrifice. That silence is noble, that aging means fading. But that's a lie. Growing older doesn't make us less worthy. It makes us wiser, stronger, and yes, more dangerous to those who took our softness for weakness. So what's the lesson here? You don't need a courtroom to reclaim your power. You don't need a dramatic exit. What you need is clarity. The kind that says, my peace is more important than your comfort. My home is not a reward to be earned, it's a sanctuary I built. And my voice, even when spoken softly, holds the weight of every year I survived. And if you're watching this, maybe you're carrying something too. A betrayal that never got acknowledged. A silence that still echoes. A fear of starting over when the world says you're supposed to settle in. You don't have to sell your house or move to a lighthouse. But maybe you can take one step today. Call the bank. Update the power of attorney. Speak with a lawyer about your will. Or simply sit down with yourself and ask, what have I outgrown that I keep holding on to? Freedom isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily act of self-respect. And you, my friend, have earned it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever chosen peace over people, no matter how hard it was? Share your story in the comments. Someone else reading might need your courage to find their own. If this story spoke to you, if it stirred something quiet and powerful inside you, please consider subscribing. This channel is a space for voices like yours, for stories that don't scream but still shake the ground. And if you feel moved to support us further, we welcome donations with gratitude. It helps us keep telling stories that matter, stories that say, you're not alone, you're not invisible, and your ending is still yours to write. Thank you for being here, and until next time, keep your voice, keep your peace, and keep walking toward the life that was waiting for you.